Welcome back to the PFF NFL show, Super Bowl review, and it is the day after the Super Bowl, and I still cannot believe that Nick Foles went to town on the Bill Belichick-led defense. Absolutely annihilated, and there's nothing more you could say about it. He won them the football game. Nick Foles outplayed Tom Brady.
Well, what's really amazing about that is that, one, Nick Foles played that well. We said going into this game, Nick Foles could land anywhere on the quarterback spectrum between total and complete disaster and near flawless. And he was right up there in that near flawless area, which is the one, I think that was the least likely area of that spectrum for him to land. And the amazing thing is, it almost wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Like I said going into that game, if Nick Foles plays like he did in the NFC Championship game, there's no way they can lose the game.
Uh-huh.
Like, the rest of that team is too good. And that's exactly what he did, and they almost did lose the game.
It was really, I thought he could have played somewhere well in between the incredible form we saw from him in the Minnesota game and the terrible form we saw at some point, in the Oakland game earlier this year, and they still had a chance to win. And like you said, they didn't. They needed every single throw that he made to end up winning that game, and he made them. He almost played better than he did in the Minnesota game. Really, all the bad throws that he did make were not even they weren't terrible decisions with the football. He was just sort of off target a few times during the game. His one interception, obviously not really his fault. Alshon Jeffrey could have caught that ball, ended up throwing it to the defender on that play, but I don't know how it's. I don't think they win that. I don't think they win the Super Bowl with Carson Wentz, because Carson Wentz has never played as well as Nick Foles did in this game or the NFC Championship game. He just hasn't in a single game.
That it is scary that is probably true. I don't know what's more surprising, that Nick Foles played that well for 2 games straight, or that the Eagles defense got absolutely gashed by the Patriots offense. I mean, I thought if there was one thing that I was relatively convinced was going to happen going into that game, it's that the Eagles defense would at least hold its own and do a reasonable job of slowing down the Patriots offense. I mean, they didn't. Neither defense was able to stop the offenses in that game at all. It was just a case of which team was going to have the ball last, where there was one big play to happen. But both offenses were just able to march down the field seemingly at will.
The funny thing was the Eagles actually hit that 40% pressure mark that we said.
Yeah.
That was the goal to slowing down Tom Brady. They had exactly 20 pressures on 50 dropbacks, exactly 40% of the time. And didn't really slow him down. But the one that did count, the forced fumble by Brandon Graham. So that was the difference between not 40 and 40. So I guess maybe technically we were right.
I wonder how many of those came on the last couple of drives where the Patriots were, all about passing, had to get it done. Because, they really didn't get that much pressure, certainly early in the game. It was like Brady wasn't getting touched at all. That was, I think, one of the stories of the game for most of it, is that this Eagles defensive front weren't able to generate the level of pressure that we were expecting them to. And even when they did get pressure, it wasn't the sort of decisive pressure that you need to get to really influence what Brady's going to do. It was guys slowly working their way to the quarterback and getting somewhere around him as he's about to attempt the pass. But they really weren't able to impose their will until right at the death, when it mattered most, where you had Fletcher Cox made a couple of impact plays. Brandon Graham got a couple of big plays as well, and that was what sealed it.
Yeah, well, the Patriots, I think, had a concerted effort to slow down that pass rush. They used play action a ton through the first 3 quarters, ended up at 34% of their attempts for the total game, Tom Brady, but that's only because the last 2 drives, he had 12 passes where they just couldn't run play action because they knew that the Eagles knew they had to pass every time. But when they did run play action, he had 248 yards off of play action on 17 dropbacks, 14.6 yards per attempt. That was obviously something in their game plan that they saw that they were going to exploit. And so they did a good job from that regard of slowing down the Eagles' pass rush. But like you said, that still wasn't an advantage for the Eagles. Those last 2 drives, he really didn't have a chance of putting anything together because they were in his face every single time.
Yeah, it was that 30-odd% number is 10% up on their season total, even with the last 2 drives taking that down because they were in pure pass mode at that point. This was a genuinely amazing game. The idea that Nick Foles had one of the greatest postseason quarterback runs in NFL history that will never make sense.
It doesn't. No, like it's still, I don't know what it is. Like I called him on the preview podcast an idiot savant. It's just like kind of like it's perfect because he's not. It's not supposed. You're not supposed to. No one's supposed to play that. Like no one that's capable of playing as badly as he plays at times should be able to play that well. Yet that was nearly a perfect game from the quarterback position that we saw.
I mean, if Tom Brady had that run to end the season, we would be talking about how amazing that was. For Nick Foles to have that playoff run is just beyond belief. What does that do to Nick Foles' value in the NFL? Because quarterbacks in the NFL don't make logical sense a lot of the time. I mean, a glimmer of hope from a quarterback can get a guy 10 more years in the league. Matt Castle is still in the league based on what he showed moonlighting on Brady's unstoppable team 10 years ago. Josh McCown is like 4 years now into his second go-around with the league because he showed a 6-game stretch back in 2013 with the Bears that he could still be a starting quarterback. Like, this could get Nick Foles another starting gig somewhere.
Well, everyone always talks about, can you win a Super Bowl with X guy? Apparently, Nick Foles is one of the few that you can actually win a Super Bowl with. And while it's a very talented roster, I don't think it's so hyper talented that he didn't have to carry it at times. Like you can't. They weren't going to win that Super Bowl, like we said, with any Joe Schmo at quarterback. It wasn't just a backup quarterback putting on that performance. That was extremely high-level quarterbacking play, even with, a great offense coordinator in Doug Peterson, even with some talent around him and a great offensive line, that still took some of the throws he made, the Corey Clement throw, other throws down the field were just, that was high-level quarterbacking that you can't necessarily, not any guy can go out there and replicate.
I mean, ultimately, he went toe-to-toe with Tom Brady and out-dueled him in the playoffs.
And Brady blinked first.
Yeah, exactly. Brady ended up with more total yards and some better box score numbers, but the PFF grade wasn't close. Nick Foles had a significantly higher grade than Tom Brady did when you analyze it throw by throw, exactly what those two guys did. Brady missed a lot more passes than Foles did. Certainly in the first half, he was wayward on a bunch of passes. Nick Foles went toe-to-toe with the greatest quarterback in the league and maybe in league history and flat out beat him in a shootout.
What do the Eagles do now, though, with Nick Foles? Because his stock as a quarterback, I don't think will ever be higher. Like, you're not going to, I don't think you're going to go into week one next year saying he's our starter, even as well as he's played this past handful of games. And as, incredible as this run was, you don't all of a sudden start him over your number 2 overall pick, your franchise quarterback who was an MVP candidate before he tore his ACL, and Carson Wentz. So do you trade him this offseason? Because that, in my opinion, is you have to. Like I said, the stock's never going to be higher. You're not necessarily in a great cap position. I think they're over the cap right now for 2018 as it stands. So they need to clear some space, get his contract off the books, and maybe get a few picks in return. I think you almost have to do that.
I just don't know who's going to come calling for Nick Foles, even after this 2-game performance. I think there's so much bad Nick Foles on tape before this point that even the NFL, having just pointed out how they go crazy over quarterbacks, is not going to go that nuts that they're going to make a big trade for Nick Foles. The Eagles, I think it does make sense as well to keep him around. Carson Wentz is still on the relatively cheap rookie contract. He tore his ACL relatively late in the season. As much as they're going to expect him back from week one, I don't know that you can guarantee that, at which point having what now looks like a capable backup in place again is a good thing for them. The other thing I think that works against that is that this is the strongest free agent quarterback group in years. Kirk Cousins is going to be there. The Vikings have 3 quarterbacks scheduled to hit free agency. At least one of those you've got to assume is going to hit the open market. Tyrod Taylor is presumably going to become available, even if Alex Smith is now off the market. There are so many quarterbacks available this year that aren't usually options. If this was a regular NFL offseason where the best option outside of Nick Foles was like Jay Cutler, bringing him back off the couch for one more go-around, then I think you might get a team picking up the phone and saying, what's it going to take to bring over Nick Foles? Given who else is available, I just don't know if it's going to happen.
The thing is, though, like when you do look at Foles' career in totality, if you kind of just take out that 2015 season where he played under Jeff Fisher and who has been proven at this point to be the opposite of a quarterback whisperer, whatever that is, the quarterback ruiner. Like, if you take out that season, it's like the numbers are fairly good. Like I was like without that season, where he had 7 touchdowns, 10 picks, so like 69 passer rating. Everything else is at least close enough to high level, to a starting franchise type quarterback play, to where I think someone's going to talk themselves into, hey, we can get similar results, or this could be our guy.
The numbers are definitely good, but we've talked before about how they're a bit of a mirage. That 2013 season was Chip Kelly's first year in the league. It was taking the NFL by storm until they kind of worked out what that offense was doing, and then began to systematically shut it down and ultimately stifle it. He had a fantastic year that year. Statistically, wasn't as good with PFF grading because of the disconnect between what he was being asked to do and the results it was producing. That system was very good at scheming him open, relatively easy attempts, and boosting his yardage. And this offense, I think, has done a similar thing. I don't want to take anything away from his last 2 games because they were genuinely phenomenal. But I wrote when Carson Wentz went down that the Eagles are not done because this coaching staff has done so well over the season with Wentz there in terms of putting that guy in a position to succeed. And they were extremely good at scheming RPOs for Nick Foles and Carson Wentz and generally boosting his production as well. So his 2 years of really good play, there's not an asterisk attached to them, but you do have to be aware of what went into those performances to generate those statistics. And more to the point, you have to be aware that if you don't have that, what kind of negative impact that's going to have on his play.
Well, I think if you don't have that, you're already behind the 8 ball if you don't have a creative offensive
coordinator.
I know there are a lot of teams that don't, but I do think if you don't have that and you're expecting to get all of a sudden a franchise quarterback type play, you're just sorely mistaken. That's not the way the NFL works nowadays with the schemes that we've been seeing over the years.
Yeah, that is true, but you're going to be relatively confident that you can plug Kirk Cousins into most NFL schemes and get capable NFL quarterback play. I don't know that you can say the same thing about Nick Foles, even if we've seen that he's capable of maybe better than that if you hit all the right buttons.
We'll see. I still think someone is going to be crazy enough to, not crazy enough. Like, he legitimately played like franchise guy over the past few weeks.
Well, here's the thing, right? So here's the question. Let's say random NFL team trades for Nick Foles this offseason. He wheels into week 1 as a starter on a base, the average NFL side out there.
Okay.
What kind of performance do you get from Nick Foles next season over 60 games? That's the thing. He could be anything. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised by almost anything at this point.
That's why, but I do think that's why. If you are the Eagles, though, just from their side, you take almost anything in return, because if Carson Wentz gets hurt again, the chance of capturing that lightning in a bottle very slim. You try to maximize that roster with Wentz and maximize it in terms of you need the cap space that would help to trade him to get that. So the other big story, though, not Foles withstanding, Malcolm Butler didn't play a snap. He played 1 snap on special teams as a vice.
Special teams counts too, I've been
informed.
So
he was the vice on the punt team, so a little insult to injury there for being completely benched. Wasn't even demoted.
Yeah.
He was taken off the defense entirely. They had Jordan Richards playing over him in this game. Probably shouldn't have, because he got targeted 3 times, gave up 81 yards. Eric Rowe, who started over him, gave up 79 yards. Not great performances by either of those guys in this one. And all we've heard from the Patriots camp is it was the matchups that we liked and the packages that we installed over the course of the week is why he didn't start. But
yeah,
we're hearing that, or we're not idiots here at PFF. We know that that's BS.
Well, yeah, whatever the story is, that is not the answer.
Yes.
There's going to be a story coming out regarding this somehow, but the one thing that is absolutely not true is that Malcolm Butler would not have helped this Patriots defense at some point during this game.
Yeah.
Like you say, Jordan Richards is one of the main beneficiaries in terms of snaps. He had a terrible game. Got his ass kicked in several plays. And that, like, Malcolm Butler genuinely in this game could easily have been the difference between winning the Super Bowl and losing the Super Bowl. So we're going to find out at some point what the deal was there. But he went from playing the most snaps of any defensive back on the Patriots this season, 97-point-something% of snaps, to not a single snap on defense, sitting on the bench, only got on the field for the one occasion that they actually face a punt, and that was it.
If this was any other coach besides Bill Belichick that did this and then didn't offer any sort of explanation, there would be outrage. Like, this would be one of the biggest stories of all. I mean, this still, I feel like, is going to explode in the upcoming days with more info that comes out on it. But this story, like, how you don't play a starting quarterback, and not just starting quarterback, he's one of the better cornerbacks in the NFL, is going to get a sizable contract over the course of the offseason, most likely, unless something comes out that really is hurting his case or that really warranted a benching. But if it's just violation of team rules stuff, like, come out and say that. Like, come out and say he violated team rules. Like, why not?
I would prefer if you're. I don't even mind the idea that we want to keep this internal, but don't comment. Don't get, like, the halftime they asked him, so what's the deal with Malcolm Butler? And he said, oh, I make the decisions that give us the best chance of winning the football game. That's clearly, just say no comment, and everything makes more sense than that. This idea of, no, this was the best move for our football team. No, it wasn't.
But it's like like you mentioned, they legitimately, in retrospect, probably cost them the game. Like, if he's out there, you have to think one, maybe two plays go the other way, and that's really all it took for this game. Like, it was that close of a game. It could have swung on one play going the other way, and maybe Jordan Richards maybe Jordan Richards doesn't make a play that Malcolm Butler would have, and that's like that. In retrospect, probably cost them this game.
Absolutely. I mean, we are talking about. People were asking me, is there a reason from a play standpoint that Butler would get benched? And you're saying, well, so he hasn't had a good year this year. It was a disappointing season, given certainly his standards a year ago and what everyone was expecting from him this year, I think, given where his career was headed. But even in those terms, even in the terms of this relatively disappointing season, he's still been pretty good. And even if you decide, okay, we're going to bench him, he's not starting anymore, he's still better than your fourth or fifth defensive back that you're bringing in now because you're not giving him any snaps. So maybe there's a case of sitting him down and not starting him if you like specific matchups, but there is no argument whatsoever for taking him off the field entirely on defense and not giving him any snaps. And we are talking about a guy who has made one of the greatest plays in Super Bowl history on defense. Mm-hmm. He is a playmaking corner, if nothing else. So even if he wouldn't have been dramatically better than a guy like Jordan Richards, though he would have, like you say, it's going to take, there's a play in there somewhere. One play over the course of this game where Malcolm Butler does something big that one of those other guys just isn't capable of doing. And this was a game that was hinging on one single play from a defense. Either way, the Eagles got it. The Patriots could have had it.
Well, and we were saying going into the game that the one area that the Eagles didn't quite match up great with, the Patriots didn't quite match up great with the Eagles receivers was who Eric Rowe was going to guard, whether it be Torrey Smith or Nelson Aguilar. They just didn't have, his quickness didn't match up well with them. And Malcolm Butler was the cornerback on that roster that did have it, that could match up with those guys in terms of lateral agility, just like can keep up with that sort of receiver. And to not play him, like that was the matchup that made more sense than Eric Rowe being on those guys. So to not play him just there was no even matchup perspective thing that couldn't justify it. It was a violation. There was something else going on behind the scenes that warranted him being benched. And like I said, it cost him a game.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be interesting to find out exactly what that story is, because that is going to essentially determine how valid benching him was. Mm-hmm. What you were saying is that what he did was so bad that we had to sit him down entirely for this game, and the only reason he got on the field was on special teams. So we're going to get to judge essentially that mindset of how bad was this thing that he ended up doing, and would that have made me bench him? Because that's what everybody's going to be second guessing.
Yeah, and the thing everyone wants to know though now is are the Patriots done? Is this it? Is this the end of the road? Does McDaniels take over as head coach and Belichick and Brady retire after this? And Gronk apparently now too.
Gronk, yeah. I don't think either Belichick or Brady retire after this. For a start, I don't think either of them wants to go out on a defeat. I think if those guys retire, it's going to be after one more win somewhere. Brady certainly doesn't seem to have any inclination of stopping. The guy wants to play till he's 52 years old or whatever it is. Gronk strikes me as one of the least likely people ever to walk away from the game in his prime.
Yeah. that was one of the the odder ones. I get that he's been injured and has back issues and that sort of thing, and probably has enough money to be set for life. But it's like he seems like he genuinely would play football for free.
Yeah, exactly.
He's only 28 years old too. I don't think he's retiring anytime soon. So
I don't think any of those guys walk away. They look like they're set to lose both coordinators this season, but it's not like they haven't done that in the past. So as long as you get Brady, Belichick, and Gronk was a bonus, and Skarnecki, I think, is the other big thing. You get those guys together, I think this is still the best team in the league next year.
Have you feel as a Lions fan seeing Matt Patricia just have zero answer defensively for Nick Foles? You have to not feel great. Like, that's got to be like, you're pretty pumped about that when it gets announced, and then all of a sudden you see him put up one of the worst defensive playoff performances in like recent memory, or at least the Super Bowl memory.
Yeah.
But they just didn't have an answer.
You don't feel good, but I think this is a case where you've got to take the broader picture. Typically Matt Patricia and that defense have been extremely good at adjustments, if nothing else. Even if they've been gashed early in games, they've been able to make the changes at halftime or throughout the game and tighten up when it really matters. And that's when they really choke teams as late in the game. I think you just have to say, look, more often than not, he does the right thing and we end up with a very good defense by the end of things. This week it went badly, and this was not the greatest advertisement for it.
His game plan, they went very blitz heavy. They blitzed 20 times on Foles' 43 dropbacks and only got pressure 14 times. On those blitz dropbacks, Foles went 15 of 20 for 210 yards and a TD, 125 passer rating. The game plan was not ideal, we'll say. But I think you're still getting a solid coach who's, like you said, been one of the better, but not really the way you want to go into a new job.
No, and the game plan wasn't ideal given how Nick Foles played. But again, it's a case of, I don't even know if it was a bad idea that if you dial up the blitz against Nick Foles, we're going to see him struggle, because you look back in 2013 against the blitz, he had a passer rating of 60. I don't think that's necessarily a bad plan. It's just that the way Nick Foles was playing, it almost didn't matter what you were going to do.
I think you could have thrown anything at him, and he was just going to tear you up, because that was Foles.
Ridiculous.
It really was. It was a heck of a game. That was one of the better Super Bowls in recent memory. All the Patriots Super Bowls are always always come down to the wire, always fantastic to watch. But that was a good one. That's it for us, though. We will be back later this week with some more draft coverage and some maybe PFF 101 talk. Have a good one.